The dust was red. Not the soft, forgiving red of a sunset, or the warm red of autumn leaves back home. This was the hard, mineral red of a dead world grinding itself into powder. The kind of dust that got into your teeth and your lungs and your memories, and stayed there forever. It tasted like rust and old stone. It smelled like nothing at all, which was somehow worse. I stood in the middle of it, surrounded on all sides, and the first thing I noticed was that my sinuses were absolutely furious with me. The second thing I noticed was the warriors. There were 50 of them. I had counted twice, the way my instructor at training camp always told us to count. Once fast, once slow. Fast to get the number, slow to get the truth. The fast count gave me 48. The slow count gave me 50, including the 2 positioned on the broken wall above and behind me, who were very good at staying still and very bad at hiding the reflection off their armor joints. 50 Cathari warriors, each one nearly 3 meters tall, covered from head to boot in dark battle plate that had been earned, not issued. The Cathari did not give their armor, they made you take it, which said quite a lot about them as a people. They had been bred for war over 600 years, the way some civilizations bred horses or built cathedrals. They were extraordinarily good at it. They had spent 12 hours hunting me across 19 kilometers of broken terrain, through collapsed corridors and mineral ravines, and the ruins of a city that had been ancient before my planet had its first ocean. And now they had me. The circle was perfect. Every angle covered, no gaps. Whoever had trained their formation work deserved genuine credit. Their commander stepped forward. War Chief Urek was famous. Not in the way that human officers were sometimes famous, for speeches or memoirs, or the careful management of their own reputation. He was famous the way a storm is famous, because of what he left behind. 4 star systems knew his name. None of them said it casually. He was enormous even by Cathari standards, and he had a scar running from his left temple to the edge of his jaw that had clearly been left there on purpose, kept instead of healed, as a record of something. He looked at me the way a very large, very calm predator looks at something it has finally, after great effort, cornered. He spoke in translated standard, which meant his command unit had a language module, which told me something useful about how long they had been operating in this sector. "You are surrounded," he said. "Surrender, and you will be processed with the respect your species is owed. Resist, and you will die where you stand. Choose." I looked at him. Then I looked up at the permanent haze that passed for a sky on Veldura, the red-brown layer of charged dust and mineral particulate that the locals, what was left of the locals, called the skin of the world. The light that got through it was strange and flat and directionless, the kind of light that made everything look equally far away. I blinked. My left eye was already irritated. My nose was doing something I would describe as staging a protest. "Is it always this dusty?" I asked. The silence that followed was extraordinary. 50 warriors who were bred to project threat and confidence and absolute readiness simply stood there, and for a moment, the only sound was the low, dry whisper of the wind, carrying more red dust across the ruins. Urek stared at me. "You are surrounded," he said again, slower. "Yes, I heard you the first time," I said. "The formation is very clean, by the way. I noticed the 2 on the wall immediately, but the spacing on your outer ring is genuinely good. Whoever trained your perimeter discipline should be proud." I paused. "I have chronic sinusitis. High particulate environments make it significantly worse. Is this level of dust constant, or does it clear at certain hours? I'm asking practically." One of the younger warriors in the inner ring shifted his weight. It was a very small movement, but I noticed it. Confusion does that. It makes trained bodies forget themselves for just a moment. Urek took a slow breath. "You are not afraid," he said. Again, not a question. A problem he was trying to identify. "I'm mildly concerned about my sinuses," I said honestly. "Beyond that, I'm mostly thinking." "About what?" "The weather." He did not know what to do with that, so he did what commanding officers throughout the universe do when confronted with something that doesn't fit their model of the situation. He defaulted to procedure. "You will disarm. You will kneel. You will—" "How long did it take to assemble 50 warriors?" I asked. "For one person. I'm curious. 6 hours? 8? Another silence. Shorter this time, because Urek was too experienced to be thrown off balance twice by the same person. But the question had landed, and I could see him deciding whether to answer it. He decided the answer made him look capable, which it did. 6 hours, he said. You evaded us across 19 kilometers of terrain in 12 hours. Alone, that is. He paused, choosing the word carefully. Noted. 3 of your people got hurt, I said. I'm sorry about that. The one in the ravine at the 3rd hour. That was an accident. I didn't mean for the rock face to come down the way it did. The other 2 I can't apologize for, because they had me on the ground and the options were limited. But I want you to know, I made choices where I could. He stared at me. You kept count, he said. I keep count of everything, I said. It's a habit. My first instructor called it aggressive awareness. She said humans weren't faster than most species, or stronger, or better at seeing in the dark. She said the only real edge we had was that we would absolutely stubbornly refuse to stop paying attention, even when it was inconvenient, even when we were tired, even when someone very large and very dangerous was watching us. I glanced up at the sky again. The dust was moving differently, a subtle thing, the kind of thing you would only notice if you had read the atmospheric report on Veldura 4 months ago and chosen to memorize the section on electromagnetic weather patterns because you had a feeling it might matter one day. The Kethari had been fighting on this world for 2 years. They had not read that section, or they had read it and considered it irrelevant, which was a different kind of mistake, but arrived at the same place. 11 minutes ago, I had estimated I needed to hold this conversation for approximately 11 minutes. I was now at somewhere between 6 and 7. Can I ask you something else? I said. Urek looked at me, as if he was genuinely uncertain whether this was a negotiation tactic or a medical condition. You may speak, he said, cautiously. Your casualties in the broader campaign here. I've seen the reports from our side. The numbers are harder than they should be for a force your size, given the terrain and the opposition strength. That's not a criticism. Veldura is genuinely difficult ground. The gravity variance between zones alone would disrupt any standard formation doctrine, and your supply lines coming in from the outer reach are... I stopped myself. Sorry. You didn't ask for a tactical review. My point is that it's been a hard posting. I can see it in how your people are standing. They're tired. That's not weakness. That's just what extended operations look like on difficult ground. I respect anyone still standing at the end of it. The shift in the air around the circle was almost imperceptible. Not softening exactly. Something more complicated than that. I was not their enemy at that moment. I was something stranger. A person talking to them like their experience was real and visible, which in my observation is one of the things that disarms people more reliably than almost anything else, because it is so rarely done. Urek was looking at me differently now. Who are you? He asked. Not a demand, an actual question. Commander Lyra Vasquez, Perseverance Class, Terran Coalition, officially a logistics coordination officer, which is what they put on the paperwork, because the actual job description is harder to summarize cleanly. I tilted my head slightly. Who are you, when you're not doing this? He blinked. The Kethari eye structure was different from ours, horizontal pupils, deep amber, but the expression that moved through his face was entirely readable. Nobody had asked him that, possibly ever. 4 minutes. I kept talking. I asked one of the outer ring warriors, a younger one whose armor had a slightly different configuration on the shoulder assembly, whether he was wearing the Mark IV or the Mark V joint seal at the pauldron. The Mark IV I mentioned had a documented thermal bleed issue on the left side under sustained atmospheric pressure. Several units had reported degraded response in the arm actuators after extended cold exposure. The warrior looked at his left pauldron. He couldn't help it. Nobody can help it when someone mentions a specific problem with a specific piece of equipment they are currently wearing. You look, it's automatic. 3 minutes. The air was electric in a way that had nothing to do with the situation. Literally electric. The mineral dust of Veldura carried a static charge, and every 16 hours, when the planet's slow rotation brought a certain atmospheric layer into alignment with the magnetosphere, that charge released in a wave that rolled across the surface like an invisible tide. The locals had a name for it, the Vimora, the deaf wind. It disrupted sensors. It disrupted communications. It disrupted the targeting systems built into Cathari battleplate with a completeness that the manufacturer had never anticipated. Because the manufacturer had never tested their systems on Veldura. Because nobody had ever expected a war to happen here. 1 minute. The dust began to rise in small, spiraling columns. The flat light shifted, gaining a faint, strange quality, like the world was holding a breath. Urek noticed. I watched him notice. I watched the exact moment when the pieces connected for him. When he looked at the moving dust and then looked at me, and understood what I had been doing for the past 10 minutes. The conversation, the questions, the careful, pleasant, endless talking. "The Vimora," he said, very quietly. "You've been on this world for 2 years," I said, just as quietly. There should have been a briefing. The fact that there wasn't is a logistics failure, not a personal one. I want you to know, I don't think it reflects badly on you. He opened his mouth. The deaf wind arrived. It was not loud. That was the thing about it. It sounded like nothing, which was exactly what it was, a silence that rolled across the ruins and swallowed every electronic signal and sensor ping and targeting lock within 300 meters. 50 suits of Cathari battleplate went operationally blind at the same moment, their systems cycling through emergency reboot protocols, their targeting arrays returning nothing but static, their comlinks dissolving into white noise. 4 minutes. I had 4 minutes, and I had spent 12 hours studying every position, every gap, every weak point in every piece of armor, every angle of every firing line, every piece of rubble that could serve as leverage or cover or something to stand on if the reach was wrong. I moved. The details of the next 4 minutes are mine. I keep them that way, not because I'm proud of them or ashamed of them, but because some things belong to the moment they happened and lose something essential when they're turned into a story. What I will say is that I made choices throughout. About what was necessary and what was not. About who needed to be stopped and how thoroughly. About the specific decision, made in the middle of everything, to leave Urek alive. A choice that cost me something, and which I made anyway, because there is a version of surviving that I am willing to live with, and a version I am not. The deaf wind passed. The dust settled slowly, drifting down like red snow over the ruins of Veldura. I was standing in the middle of the circle. My knuckles were split open on both hands. My left ear was ringing in a high, clean tone that I knew from experience would last about 3 hours. There was a cut above my right eyebrow that was bleeding in that steady, businesslike way that cuts on the forehead always do, and I pressed the back of my hand against it without much urgency. Urek was on the ground, alive, conscious, looking up at the strange, flat sky with an expression I recognized, not defeat exactly, but the particular quiet that comes when something you believed completely about the world turns out to be less certain than you thought. His left pauldron was cracked along the seal. Mark 4, thermal bleed issue. Degraded response in the arm actuators. I found a Cathari comm unit on the ground nearby, one that was cycling back online as the interference cleared. I switched it to emergency broadcast, found the coalition frequency I had memorized before the dropship went down, and transmitted my position in calm, clear standard. I estimated my status as stable. I requested extraction. I signed off. Then I sat down on a piece of broken wall and waited. The dust was still settling, fine red particles drifting through the flat light, catching it briefly, before disappearing into the general haze. The ruins stretched out around me in every direction, stone columns, collapsed archways, the bones of a city that had been standing for longer than humanity had been writing things down. I breathed experimentally through my nose. Slightly better, still irritated. My sinuses were going to complain about this day for at least a week. Behind me, after a long silence, Urek said something in his own language, low and quiet. I did not have a translation module, and I did not ask him to repeat it. Some things are not meant for the person they are said near. Some things are just a person talking to the sky, because the sky is wide enough to hold it. I sat there and listened to the wind, and watched the red dust move across the ruins in long, slow curtains, the way it had probably moved for 1,000 years before either of us arrived to have opinions about it. My ride would be here within the hour. 50 elite warriors, 6 centuries of breeding, One very thorough atmospheric briefing from 4 months ago that I had chosen to memorize, because I had a feeling it might matter. I pressed my hand against the cut above my eyebrow. I've had worse mornings,